from the studios of Atlantic Television Network. This is ATN International News. Let's take a look at the headlines. In Sudan, humanitarian aid resumes in war-torn Darfur. In New York, Chinese dissident accused of spying for Beijing. Oprah urges voters to choose truth. In Las Vegas, official testifies he was framed in reporter's murder. And in Chicago, pro-Palestinian delegates denied speaking slot. Delays to change election law sparks protests. And in Australia, one half of gay penguin couple dies. These and many more to come your way in a moment. Please do stay with us. And now the news in details. We begin with Africa. Food deliveries have resumed to Sudan's famine-threatened Darfur region following the reopening of a key border crossing by Sudanese authorities after a 6-month closure as civil war rages in the country. The United Nations Food Agency said in a statement on Wednesday that the first convoy of trucks laden with essential food supplies arrived in Darfur from neighboring Chad through the reopened Adre border, and the supplies are intended for 13,000 people in Kerenik in Darfur who are at imminent risk of famine. More than 10 million people have fled their homes, and at least 18,000 others have been killed since the war broke out in April 2023 between the Sudanese Armed Forces and paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. According to the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, and over half the country's population now faces acute hunger, according to reports. ATN gathered that the Adre crossing offers the most direct and efficient route for delivering aid to Darfur from Chad, enabling trucks to reach key distribution points within a day. Last week, the Sudanese government agreed to open key border crossing for humanitarian aid amid international pressure. Sudan Sovereign Council announced that it would open the Adre crossing in the country's border with Chad for 3 months after it was closed in February by the Sudanese army, which alleged that the crossing was being used to move weapons. United Nations Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, 6 million people in Sudan need assistance, more than half of the country's population. Television icon Oprah Winfrey made a surprise appearance at the Democratic National Convention in her hometown of Chicago, where she urged Democrats and independent voters to choose common sense over nonsense, in her words. Winfrey, who has avoided the political spotlight in recent years, lent some of her star power to Vice President Kamala Harris and her running mate, Minnesota Tim Walz, on the third night of the day convention. Winfrey's comments came before Mr. Walz's primetime speech to formally accept the party's nomination for the vice president. The former daytime talk show host focused on a message of unity while also tacitly criticizing Ms. Harris and Mr. Walz's Republican changes, former President Donald Trump and Ohio J.D. Vance. The billionaire media mogul has shied away from politics in recent years. In 2007, she endorsed then Illinois Senator Barack Obama's long-shot bid for president. Winfrey, who considered Mr. Obama a friend as the two overlapped in Chicago's political orbit, hosted fundraisers and volunteered for his campaign in Iowa. On Wednesday night, Winfrey cast herself as independent, urging other like-minded voters at Democrats in November. Wednesday night also included several other celebrity cameos, including TV wonder Mindy Kaling and Kenan Thompson. U.S. prosecutors have filed criminal charges against a Chinese dissident living in the U.S., accusing him of being an agent of Beijing's intelligence service. ATN gathered that Yongjung Tang, 67 years old, was arrested on Wednesday in New York City, alleged to have spied on U.S.-based Chinese democracy activities and dissidents. Mr. Tang, now a naturalized U.S. citizen, is also accused of making false statements to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. It also alleged that between 2018 and 2023, he acted as China's agent under orders of the country's Ministry of State Security. Mr. Tang is accused of regularly receiving instructions via email, encrypted chats, and other means of communications from the agency. It is also alleged that he regularly received instructions from and reported to an MSS intelligence officer regarding individuals and groups viewed by the People's Republic of China as potentially adverse to the People's Republic of China's interests, including prominent U.S.-based Chinese democracy activists and dissidents. However, newsmen could not immediately identify a lawyer for Mr. Tang. He apparently agreed to work for China's intelligence agency in a bid to see his family living in mainland China, and according to court documents, Mr. Tang was imprisoned in China for opposing the Chinese government. Report has it that he protested against the Chinese Communist Party during the 1989 Tiananmen Square demonstrations. In about 2002, he managed to defect to Taiwan and was later granted political asylum in the U.S. Tim Walz is running for vice president, but for a while on Wednesday night, it felt like he was going to be the nation's high school football coach. Before he spoke, roughly a dozen of the players on the team he helped coach to a Minnesota State championship decades ago ran on stage, some wearing their old high school dresses, bouncing to the blasting horns of a marching band. His speech was heavy on his personal story, his time as a football coach, his upbringing, his enlistment in the Army National Guard, his work as a high school teacher, and his service as a congressman and governor. In a folk style that the Democratic campaign believes connects with moderate voters in the crucial states of the Midwest, he told the crowd that he was ready to turn the page on these guys, referring to Donald Trump and his running mate J.D. Vance. He followed a diverse range of speakers and entertainers who took to the stage on the third night of the convention in Chicago, with Oprah Winfrey receiving the most raucous response after a surprise appearance in her hometown. The four-day party extravaganza will culminate this evening when Vice President Kamala Harris formally accepts the Democratic nomination, a little over a month after President Joe Biden stepped out of the race. But on Wednesday night, everything built up to Tim Walz, a man virtually unknown to most Americans just weeks ago. He drew from the first speech he gave in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania earlier this month after being chosen as Kamala Harris' running mate. Repurposing some of the same zingers, he also touted the Democratic priorities he has enacted while serving as Minnesota governor, including free school lunches, paid family and medical leave, middle-class tax cuts, and lower prescription drug prices. Former Las Vegas official accused of killing a reporter who wrote negative stories about him has taken the stand in his own defense, telling jurors he was framed. Robert Stallis, a 47-year-old, has been jailed since 2022 for allegedly stabbing Las Vegas Review-Journal investigative reporter Jeff Jarman. Prosecutors have presented evidence including DNA they said belonged to Mr. Stallis found under Mr. Jones and have arrested their case on Monday after hearing from 28 witnesses over 4 days. One homicide detective testified that over 100 images of Mr. Jarman's home were found on Mr. Stallis' mobile phone. The detective alleged the suspect was engaged in surveillance of the journalist. Mr. Jarman, 69 years old, was stabbed 7 times in the neck and torso in broad daylight outside his Nevada home on 2nd of September 2022. In his testimony, Mr. Stallis said he only learned about the details of how Mr. Jarman died when the medical examiner testified last week. Mr. Stallis, who has pleaded not guilty, is also expected to continue his testimony today. A group of pro-Palestinian Democrats say their request for a speaking slot at this week's Democratic National Convention has been denied by party leaders. The uncommitted delegates were hoping as late as Wednesday evening that a Palestinian-American politician would be allowed to speak critically about Israel's war in Gaza. Abbas Alaway, an uncommitted delegate from Michigan, was emotional as he relayed the news outside the United Center, where the convention concludes on today. Mr. Alaway said it was unacceptable that the request for a speaking slot was turned down. The uncommitted delegates were selected in states' Democratic primaries earlier this year, part of an internal party protest against U.S. support for Israel. President Joe Biden won an overwhelming share of primary voters, but pro-Palestinian activists urged people to vote uncommitted and similar options in a number of states. Enough Democratic voters did so to send 30 delegates to the convention in Chicago, out of a total of more than 2,400 delegates, after they announced that their request had been rejected. Mr. Alawi and 3 other uncommitted delegates began a sit-in outside the arena. The delegates also say that they had collected signatures from nearly 250 Harris delegates supporting a ceasefire in Gaza. The war in the Middle East has been the main focus of a series of protests outside the Democratic Convention this week. On Monday, several thousand protesters marched the United Center, although the turnout was less than organizers had expected. A smaller protest held outside the Israeli consulate in Chicago on Tuesday led to clashes between protesters and police, resulting in 56 arrests. Another march outside the convention site is planned for today evening. Taylor Swift has issued her first statement on the cancellation of her concerts in Vienna amid a full terror plot. Having our Vienna shows cancelled was devastating, she wrote in a statement posted on Instagram on Wednesday, saying that the reason for the cancellations filled her with a new sense of fear and a tremendous amount of guilt because so many people had planned on coming to those shows. She thanked authorities and said she waited to speak until the European leg of her Eras tour concluded to prioritize safety. In the week of the cancellations, Swift's representatives did not respond to multiple requests for comment from the Associated Press and other news organizations, and her social media pages had gone dormant. Concert organizer Barracuda Music had said it cancelled the 3-night Vienna run that would have begun on August 8 because the arrests made in connection to the conspiracy were too close to showtime. Authorities said a 19-year-old suspect had planned to target spectators outside the Ernst Happel Stadium with knives or homemade explosives, hoping to kill as many people as possible, Austrian officials said. They appear to have been inspired by the Islamic State group and Al-Qaeda. Tens of thousands of Swifties from around the world had traveled to Vienna for the shows. Swift's Instagram post also commemorates the end of the European leg with a tribute to her 5 nights at London's Wembley Stadium, which she says factored into her to wait to speak out and ultimately felt like a beautiful dream sequence. The shows in London, the next stop scheduled after Vienna, also came on the heels of a stabbing at a Swift-themed dance class that left 3 girls dead in the UK. In a statement issued after the Southport attack, Swift said he was just completely in shock and at a complete loss for how to ever convey her sympathies to those families. News outlets reported that Swift met with some of the survivors backstage in London. The record-smashing tour is hiatus until October, when it resumes in Miami. You're watching the international news on Atlantic Television Network. We will be back after this break. Please do stay with us. Welcome back to the broadcast of the international news on Atlantic Television Network. We are open for adverts, placements, bookings and commercials. And you can connect with us and watch us on ATN socials, Facebook and YouTube Atlantic Television Network, Instagram and TikTok Atlantic TV Network 1, X formerly Twitter Atlantic TV Net. Watch us live on our website atlanticnetwork.tv. Now to the rest of our stories. Indonesia's parliament has postponed ratifying changes to an elections law until today as protesters attempted to tear down the gates of parliament, the capital, following outcry over legislation seen to strengthen the political influence of outgoing President Joko Widodo. The plenary session to pass the changes was delayed due to a lack of a quorum. Legislator Habib Urrahman told newsmen outside the Parliament building. However, it is unclear if Parliament will reconvene to pass the law before the registration for regional elections opens next Tuesday. ATN learned that the Parliament planned to ratify changes that would have reversed a ruling by the Constitutional Court earlier this week. The legislative changes would have blocked a vocal government critic in the race for the influential post of Jakarta governor, and also paved the way for Widodo's youngest son to run in elections in Java this November. The power struggle between the parliament and the judiciary comes amid a week of dramatic political developments in the world's third largest democracy. And in the final stretch of the president's second term, Widodo downplayed the concerns, saying on Wednesday that the court ruling and parliamentary deliberations were part of standard checks and balances. ATN also gathered that thousands of demonstrators gathered outside the parliament building in Jakarta, some breaching part of a fence but few daring to cross it. Others dropped banners accusing Jokowi of destroying democracy and carried colorful banners and props, including a mock guillotine featuring the president's face. Indonesian presidential spokesperson Hassan Nasbi called for calm and urged protesters to avoid violence, as some scenes showed demonstrators also throwing rocks at parliament in Bandung. Protests were held in multiple cities across the country, with tear gas fired at demonstrators in Samarang. TV footage showed legal experts and political analysts have described the power struggle as bordering in a constitutional crisis. Rescuers are scrambling to evacuate flooded communities after heavy rains inundated parts of Bangladesh and northeast India, causing rivers in both sides of the border to reach extreme levels. ATN gathered that more than 300,000 people in southeastern Bangladesh have been impacted by the flooding, which has plunged hundreds of homes underwater, leaving residents stranded on rooftops. In India, at least 8 people were killed by landslide and drowning, while tens of thousands have sought shelter in relief camps, according to disaster management authorities. Parts of India's northeast border state of Tripura and districts in eastern Bangladesh have recorded heavy rainfall of up to nearly 200 millimeters in recent days, which has caused perilous floodwaters to rise. As of today, Bangladesh's Flood Forecasting and Warning Center said 11 rivers in the region recorded water levels above the danger level. In the hard-hit Feni district of Chattogram, a city in southeast Bangladesh, efforts are on the way to rescue people from waterlogged homes and to shelter the displaced. Army and Navy personnel are evacuating people by boat with the help of volunteers. Government buildings and high schools have been converted into shelters, and more than 25,000 people are sheltering in relief camps, according to reports. Videos showed residents paddling in canoes and swimming with their belongings through muddy streams as floodwaters lapped at the roofs of homes. Meanwhile, India denied claims circulating on social media that the flooding was due to the forced opening of a dam on the Gomati River, which flows through Tripura and enters Bangladesh through the district of Comilla. According to Tripura's Power Minister Ratan Nath, the dam was designed so that excess water escapes automatically after the water level reaches a certain point. More wet weather is expected across Tripura and eastern Bangladesh, with forecasts of 50 millimeters to 150 millimeters of rain over the next 3 days. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi urged diplomatic efforts to end the war in Ukraine during a visit to neighboring Poland today, pledging India's support and saying that no conflicts can be resolved on a battle. Sitting on the eastern flank of NATO and the European Union, Poland is concerned about a 2-year-old war across its eastern border, offering political, humanitarian and defense support to Ukraine. Modi and Turks met for talks in security, the war in Ukraine by India's strategic partner Russia, and invigorating bilateral ties. Later, the Indian leader was to meet with Poland's President Andrzej Duda. The two leaders said that the visit, which marks 70 years of official bilateral relations, raised the ties to a strategic level, covering a wide range of cooperation, including in the IT, security and defense industries. Ahead of his visit, Modi said Poland was India's key economic partner in Central Europe. ATN learned that an agreement was signed to facilitate the mobility of specialized workers between the two countries. According to figures cited by the Embassy of India, the total value of bilateral trade increased from $1.95 billion to $5.72 billion from 2013 to 2023, with India's exports accounting for a majority. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky described the meeting as a huge disappointment and a devastating blow to peace and efforts. He also chided Modi for hugging Putin during the meeting. Controversial influencer Andrew Tate has been remanded in custody overnight as part of an investigation into no allegations against him. He and his brother, Tristan, were taken in for questioning by Romania's Serious Crime Agency, Directorate for Investigating Organized Crime and Terrorism, as police searched their home. The internet personality was already awaiting trial for rape and human trafficking, but could potentially now face additional charges of sex with and trafficking in underage persons, as well as money laundering and attempting to influence witnesses. Prosecutor says Andrew and Tristan Tate, who have a massive following on social media, have denied all previous charges against them. They were first detained in Romania in December 2022 and then released from house arrest in August 2023. According to a statement from Directorate for Investigating Organized Crime and Terrorism earlier in the day, who said 4 houses were searched on Wednesday morning in the capital, Bucharest, and in Ilov County. The brothers were then driven to Directorate for Investigating Organized Crime and Terrorism in Bucharest for questioning, and afterwards taken into custody in handcuffs and under armed guard. They had been remanded in custody for 24 hours. Earlier on Wednesday, the brothers were met by a small crowd of reporters and supporters as they arrived at the Directorate for Investigating Organized Crime and Terrorism building in police vans. The internet personalities are also wanted in the UK in connection with separate and unrelated sexual offenses alleged committed there. U.S. President Joe Biden has stressed the urgency of reaching a Gaza ceasefire and hostage release deal to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. In a call on Wednesday, which was also joined by Vice President Kamala Harris, Mr. Biden is said to have stated the importance of removing any remaining obstacles blocking an agreement with Hamas. He also reaffirmed Washington's commitment to help defend Israel against what the White House called all threats from Iran. including its proxy terrorist groups Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. This comes after the U.S. Secretary of State wrapped up a diplomatic tour of the Middle East, pushing for a deal that could end the war. The office of Mr. Netanyahu reiterated on Wednesday that Israel planned to keep troops in a strip of land along the border between Gaza and Egypt, known as the Philadelphia Corridor, in the event of any such deal. The issue has become a key sticking point, with Hamas so far insisting on a total withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza. Egypt also opposed the presence of Israeli troops along its border with Gaza. On Monday, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Israel had agreed to a U.S. bridging proposal after a 3-hour meeting with Mr. Netanyahu in Jerusalem. Mr. Blinken would also not confirm to newsmen whether the U.S. proposal stipulated the withdrawal of Israeli troops from the Philadelphia corridor, but Mr. Netanyahu's repeated public insistence on the plan appears to have irritated Washington. ATN also learned that a new round of ceasefire talks is set to take place in Cairo this weekend, with U.S., Israeli, Egyptian, and Qatari representatives in attendance. Hamas has so far not said they will attend, but it is believed they are continuing to receive updates on the negotiations from Egyptian and Qatari mediators. More than 40,223 people have been killed in Gaza since then, according to the territory's Hamas-run health ministry, which does not give details of civilian and combatant deaths. The UN Human Rights Office says most of those killed were women and children. Israel and Lebanon's Hezbollah movement also exchanged fire on Wednesday, with Israel saying it hit a Hezbollah weapons storage facility in the Bekaa Valley overnight. The Lebanese health ministry said one person was killed and 30 others injured. In response, Hezbollah, which is backed by Iran, said it targeted Israeli military positions in the Golan Heights with a rocket barrage. Israeli authorities say 2 homes were hit and 1 person was injured. Gaza faces uphill battle against polio. Palestinian Health Ministry in the occupied West Bank said last week that tests in Jordan had confirmed polio in an unvaccinated 10-month-old baby from central Gaza. According to the United Nations, Gaza had not registered a case for 25 years, although type 2 poliovirus was detected in samples collected from the territory's wastewater in June. Poliovirus is highly infectious and most often spread through sewage and contaminated water. The disease mainly affects children under the age of 5. It can cause deformities and paralysis and is potentially fatal. United Nations bodies, the World Health Organization and Children's Agency UNICEF says they have detailed plans to vaccinate 640,000 children across Gaza. But a major challenge remains Israel's devastating military campaign triggered by Hamas' October 7 attack on the country's south. Equipment to support the extensive campaign, which United Nations agencies say could start on August the 31st, has already arrived in the region. Under the United Nations plan, 2,700 health workers in 708 teams will take part, with the World Health Organization overseeing the effort, said Richard Pipicon, the agency's representative in the Palestinian territories. ATN learned that UNICEF would ensure the cold supply chain as vaccines are brought into and distributed across Gaza. Cold chain components, including refrigerators, arrived on Wednesday at Israel's main international airport. Some 1.6 million doses of the oral vaccine would follow and are expected to enter Gaza on Sunday via the Kerem Shalom crossing, and that the vaccines would first be kept at a UN storage space in central Gaza and then distributed to public and private health facilities. Unrelenting airstrikes by Israel more than 10 months into its war against Gaza rulers, Hamas, restrictions of aid entering the besieged territory, and hot summer temperatures all threaten the viability of a life-saving inoculation drive. Nearly all the territory's 2.4 million people have been displaced at least once during the war. However, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for 2 7-day breaks in the war to administer doses. Spain, an Australian gentoo penguin who became an unlikely global symbol for equality, has died from apparent natural causes at age 11. The aquarium in Sydney, where they resided, said Spain rose to global fame in 2008 when he partnered with fellow male gentoo penguin Magic. After the two were spotted waddling around the swimming together before breeding season. The same-sex penguin power couple known as Fengic inspired millions with their unshakable bond and heartwarming family. Together, they raised 2 chicks, Lara, 6, and Clancy, 4. Spain lived a full life for a gentoo penguin, a species with an average lifespan of roughly 12 to 13 years. He and Magic shared an inseparable bond. The two were often seen together outside of breeding season, a rarity for their species. The pair inspired a Mardi Gras float featured in the Netflix series Atypical, and have been included in the education curriculum in New South Wales, their Australian home state. Countless books and movies also touch on their love story, according to report. In 2018, Spain and Magic became parents after they were entrusted to hatch a backup egg given to them by another penguin couple who had laid 2 eggs. It's common for gentoo penguins to lay 2 eggs each breeding season, but the sub-Antarctic penguins usually only have the resources to incubate and raise a single egg, so the backup chick may not survive. Not in this case. On October 19, 2018, an adorable 91-gram penguin chick named Lara was born to the doting parents. In 2020, the Fengic family became 4 after Clancy joined the fold. Spain and Magic are not the only same-sex penguin couple to successfully hatch an egg. Couples in New York and Spain have also become parents. Spain not only helped in the championing of equality. Through the couple's fame, the aquarium was able to raise awareness and money for important causes including conservation, plastic pollution, climate change, and the need to protect wild penguins, Sea Life said. Tributes from fans poured in on the aquarium's website. And that's it on the international news for today. Before we go, another look at the major stories. In Sudan, humanitarian aid resumes in war-torn Darfur. In New York, Chinese dissident accused of spying for Beijing. And in the U.S., Oprah urges voters to choose truth. In Las Vegas, official testifies he was framed in reporter's murder case. In Chicago, pro-Palestinian delegates denied speaking slurs. And in Indonesia, delays to change election law spark protests. In Australia, 1/2 of gay penguin couple dies. That's it on the international news for today. I'm Victor Peter. Thank you so much for watching. You can follow us on our social media platforms. On X, formerly Twitter, is Atlantic Television Network. Facebook and YouTube at Atlantic Television Network. Instagram at Atlantic Television Network. Watch us live on our website, atlanticnetwork.tv. Peace and unity are the pathways to progress. Business news comes up next with Wendy. Do stay with us.